Thank you so much. Such a pleasure to virtually be there. Hopefully, in the future, I can actually be there. I know we have potential plans to do that. So I can't see all of you, but always feel free to shout out with questions, and I know there'll be time afterwards too. So this is a little teaser. I know you've been hearing probably a lot about adult medicine, and um, that usually excludes women's health and pediatrics, unfortunately. But here we're here to talk to you about the wonderful fields, the amazing opportunities, and get you hopefully a little excited about that. First, I'll probably start with how challenging it is, though. Um, so, of course, I'm one of the assistant directors of the Innovation Fellowship and took that myself at Stanford Biodesign and deeply entrenched there. We just had some rebranding that we went through with a new donor, but we truly believe in these values. And so we think it's important to show these every single time where we talk, to talk about the fact that this is a team sport, that we really do this by learning how to collaborate and have empathy and promote leadership within all of our own fellows and that as well. So we do that through education, innovation, and policy. So I know you guys know this a little bit because I heard you've been hearing a little bit about, biodesign programs and certainly Biodesign Finland. But most of what happens in university academic settings and in many settings is you develop an innovative technology and then you try to find the need for that. And of course, biodesign flips this completely on their head and it's more of a need pull. So we really believe in deeply understanding the need, and then the technology almost invents itself, not quite, but it certainly does then make it a lot easier to develop a technology that will ultimately lead to adoption. I find this to be particularly helpful in pediatrics, where you really have to be incredibly streamlined. Of course, this is the biodesign process at work, identifying the secret sauce. What is the real clinical need? Identifying a lot of them and screening down to the most compelling unmet clinical need. And where I think we really have to work in pediatrics, especially, is, of course, crystallizing that need. But where we've been able to really come up with some creative solutions are around building a viable business. So people often look to pediatrics as a space that is filled with philanthropy, and maybe the company should be sourced in that way. However, I firmly believe that you still have to have a viable business to be able to sustain whatever technology you've developed, to be able to get that consistently to patients in a safe manner. So, Biodesign loves to tout, at Stanford especially, that, over its 20 plus year history, that they've helped over 13 million. But the really sad part was, up until a few years ago, the number helped was of pediatric patients was actually only about 14,000. And that's because the process, the way that it's typically done, often selects for larger markets as opposed to smaller markets. And we've begun to change that at Biodesign as well. And this is a slide I frequently show because I think it's really important for people to understand the decisions we're making. So industry truly spends more money to develop health technologies that address the last month of life than on technologies for the first 18 years of life that can really transform a lifetime. And to me, that just means we have our priorities in the wrong place. When we say that children are a small population, they really are 25% of the population. So it's actually not that small. And as James Wall always says, they are 100% of our future. So something to consider. But all of this translates. And so I'm showing this from a US perspective to give you that insight. But from the US FDA, the approvals over the last several years have really been stagnant. So the pediatric approvals are down there on those blue boxes, and adult approvals, and this is actual medical devices, not including all health technology, of course, but just a picture of that, is increasing and, of course, much larger. So this was a real concern of the FDA. They already had what we call pediatric device consortiums, which is direct funding for US-based pediatric health technologies and medical devices specifically. But they aim to change this. And so we still have a lot of work to do, but starting to change it a little. Of course, there's all these unique challenges, and this is just a small sampling of that. But people specifically talk about, oh, pediatrics is too hard. But the first thing they always say is there's too small of a market. And I reject that absolutely because of what I said before. I think that there absolutely is a market in some circumstances, and probably most circumstances. You might need to find people who are more likely to turn up the impact dial and turn down, but not off the investment or ROI dial as well. But there's still definitely money to be made, and we've proven and shown that it can happen. Um, there's also engineering constraints. So you're dealing with a population who's growing over time. There are subpopulations. They're just smaller, which makes engineering more challenging. And then, of course, we're always worried about discomfort. There's some ethical concerns around harming children or what that looks like, and their inability to self-advocate or vote. And then, of course, for regulatory constraints, this is more of a perceived risk that we see. I hear it a lot that there's this burden of FDA approval and those types of things, but they're actually incredibly collaborative and very, very interested in promoting pediatric activities and truly do. We say put your money where your mouth is, but they say that, but they also back it up with financial resources. So this is just one thing I wanted you guys to see. This is kind of the state prior to one company that we developed around what is going on with adult central line management. So you put a central catheter through the skin, and this goes into the central blood supply. So it's very at risk for infection. But as you can see, adult central line management is protective. That's a standard tape and standard materials that are developed by a company. They have a quality system around that, and it's simple. But for neonatal central line development, these go through the umbilical cord. And it's a desiccating umbilical cord, so you can't use the other potential solutions. You essentially have an art project. This is just tape that people put together, and that is what secures those lines. They also have the highest rates of infection of any central line. So this is what we're doing for our most vulnerable patients pretty routinely around the world until we developed a really simple solution. And so this isn't so much to show you the solution, but is to say there was a really significant problem with a really significant impact. And one of our groups that I happen to have been a part of was able to develop a silicone capsule. So it's called Life Bubble to secure the catheter. And that allowed for decreased migration. And so we didn't just do it once, but we've done it multiple times to prove that this really can work. So with the first company, of course, it becomes a company because that's one of the main ways you have to directly translate to health technologies. Novonate raised only $1 million and then was commercially available. We tend to stay in the academic system a little bit longer, utilize all those resources, utilize non-dilutive grants. But we also wanted to prove that these were venture capital backed companies that could lead to acquisition. One company that I personally co-founded was called Emmy, and it was really about managing life on birth control pills. It was a hardware software combination, still is available, but we raised $3.5 million and sold that in 2022. And of course, selling these for modest amounts, but because we didn't go out and raise tens of millions or hundreds of millions of dollars, they really were attractive to acquirers. And then there was another company that was acquired by Apple that simplified and did asthma home monitoring, measuring symptoms, and then also simplifying that for children. So these were always focused on children and specifically designed for them. And so we continue to do this over again. We have a model where we're able to, within the academic facility and within Stanford Biodesign, really focus on peds and maternal health. And this is my amazing team. We have amazing fellows. A lot of people stick around for a second year of fellowship. They're also accomplished. They all have PhDs or MDs. And then we have some people through the Gates Foundation, like Nathaniel, George, and Mohit, who have gone back to their home country, that be Nigeria or India, to actually do a lot of work in low to middle income countries. to try to develop health technology specific for those populations. And we have people working on anything from pharmaceuticals to medical devices to also including digital health solutions as well. But so we do our own projects and we spin out our own companies, but then we also, for no cost to anyone, support other projects. And we do that through some of our grants. We've helped over 150 companies by this point, mostly focused in the pediatric area, but we did want to expand that. And so we've raised philanthropic support because our FDA grant only allows us to do pediatric in the US, but we're able to support projects and help provide advice and different services for pediatric fetal, which in the US that's not considered maternal or pediatric. And then also we just broke out neonatal, probably because I'm a neonatologist too. As you can see, we've helped people from all over the world. We probably need to update that a little bit, but there's definitely been a team from Finland as well, and at all developmental stages too. Over the past couple of years, we've been able to provide coaching to a bunch of teams, introduction to KOLs and consultants, direct funding, but mostly we're happy that those companies, even though they're early stage, have really treated over 78,000 patients, have raised another 234 million on their own, created full-time jobs, and even exited a bit. So some of those things, and I'll just give you a quick overview of a couple of things we're personally working on. So this is one run by Dr. Kunsheth. She's a pediatric urologist that's part of our team. And this is really addressing fetal shunts. So while the baby is still within mom, there's a bladder outlet obstruction. And what tends to happen is you put in a shunt through the placenta, you don't go through the placenta, you go through, you're going straight into the baby, into the bladder, and then you put that in to help drain the fluid from there. And this can have implications on their lung development, et cetera. But those shunts come out quite frequently. 50 to 80% need replacement. And so they are in animal models right now, but have developed a shunt to actually deal with this that has decreased dislodgement and have been able to raise a lot of compassionate capital around this, along with tremendous grant support as well. One of my prime project is called Exhalos. It's a breath monitoring for identifying necrotizing enterocolitis over 2 days in advance. And this is a severe disease that causes bowel injury or death for newborns. And so we've been able to do this. We're still within the university, but have been able to raise significant capital through several different grant mechanisms and supportive mechanisms as well. So if you want to learn more, we just launched a podcast like every millennial does, I suppose. But we're talking to different innovators around the world, really focusing on pediatric and maternal health, but especially pediatrics, and how we actually get it done and how we're actually able to innovate in this space. So tune into that wherever you listen to your podcast. We're on LinkedIn. And then we also have a newsletter highlighting some of the companies that we're working with, highlighting our team, and in general, talking about different issues that pediatric innovators face. If you want to learn more, feel free to reach out. I know some of you have already reached out on LinkedIn, and happy to chat further in any way, shape, or form. Of course, this was a very brief overview and mostly just a teaser. So, so grateful to be here.